Joining me now, the ranking Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Michael McCaul, the great state of Texas. Congressman, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Oh, thanks, Mike, and happy Independence Day to you.
Happy Independence Day. On Afghanistan, President Biden taking some heat from an unlikely place. The Washington Post editorial page, which expresses the concern al-Qaeda could reestablish bases in the country. Waves of refugees are likely to pour out, and rivals such as Iran, China, and Russia could take from this withdrawal that President Biden lacks the stomach to stand up for U.S. allies. Do you share those concerns?
Yes, I do. We just handed Bagram Air Base over to the Afghans, which is a strategic asset in the region to protect us from terrorists. It counters Russia, China, and Iran in the region. Now that's been turned over to the Afghan. And when you look at the IC assessment, that'd be the intelligence community's assessment, some reporting that within 6 months, the Taliban could completely take over the country, including Bagram Air Base. It's quite frightening, and they have gone on quite an offensive right now in the more rural areas, and they're poised to take over provincial capitals once our troops are finally out of there. It looks like within a month will be completely withdrawn. My criticism, we can debate how long to stay there, but my criticism is the lack of planning and preparation for this. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and I worry. Also, when I met with President Ghani last week, Mike, they talked about his team about this is going to be the year of the jihad. What do they mean by that? It means all the young males in Pakistan at the madrasas are poised with the Taliban to pour over into Afghanistan, and you're going to see a major civil war take place. And I don't think at the end of the day it's going to look pretty. At the end of the day, I worry about the embassy first and foremost.
Sure. Bloomberg reported Friday a plan is still in flux to expedite immigration visas. You've emphasized the importance of moving quickly. Are you satisfied there's a plan to evacuate the thousands of Afghan interpreters and their families who have risked their lives to help Americans there?
Well, look, we made a promise to them. They served with our special forces, these interpreters. We told them we'd take care of them, and we can't turn our backs and leave them to die. They will be slaughtered by the Taliban. They're targeted by the Taliban. We have to get them out of there. There are about 9,000 of them. And I've been really pleading with the administration to come up with a plan. They just haven't prepared for this at all. The last I've heard, I think finally we've gotten some attention, and Kazakhstan looks as a possible place to do this. And in terms of ISR, that'd be intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capability, Uzbekistan's looking like a better place to do this. But we're going dark in Afghanistan, and there are going to be consequences long-term to this. And at the end of the day, Mike, when we fully withdraw, the devastation and the killings and women, humanitarian crisis, fleeing across the border in Pakistan, President Biden's going to own these ugly images.
Earlier this year, you said it was important not to repeat past mistakes of 100% pullout like in Iraq, to leave a residual force. Top Pentagon officials and even the president's own Secretary of State advised the president not to pull out completely, but to leave a few thousand American personnel, something Mr. Biden campaigned on. Why is he doing this?
I think it's political. It's just all boils down to politics. If you talk to anybody in the national security realm or in the Defense Department, and you mentioned Secretary Austin, the head of the DOD. Nobody thought this was a good idea. A residual force of 2,500 troops is not a whole lot of a footprint compared to where we have troops elsewhere to provide stability in the region. And I'm concerned with this complete decision to pull out, that it's not going to have a good ending to it. And I look at the embassy itself. We're going to have 600 people, DOD and other personnel. I'm from Texas, the Alamo. We had 250 Texans, 5,000 Mexicans. Didn't end up so well there. I think the odds are worse in Afghanistan.
Do you worry the United States will be forced to send troops back into Afghanistan, similar to what was done after leaving Iraq 10 years ago?
All the top experts I talk to, that's their greatest fear, is that you may be doing this for political purposes, but at some point, our vital interests are ISIS and al-Qaeda, and we are going to give them a safe haven as the Taliban takes over that nation, and that vacuum is going to be filled by terrorists. and I'm concerned that we will be going back.
To COVID origins in China, what's your level of confidence that the U.S. intelligence community will get to the facts in terms of the origins of COVID-19?
Well, the Chinese Communist Party will not open up the lab to this investigation, but we are getting information from other sources, and I believe there's a high degree probability now that it came from that lab for a number of reasons. You know, one is the cover-up that took place. I call it the greatest cover-up in human history. And you don't cover up something if you're not trying to hide something. Mm-hmm. You know, they deleted all their databases with respect to the virus at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The PLA came in 2019 and took over the lab, the head of the Chem Bio Warfare program. That doesn't happen unless something happened, you know, at that lab. So I think, you know, I wish the Democrats would join with us on this very important investigation of what caused this problem. You know, they're really playing. It's a dangerous game to do gain of research function research and genetically manipulate viruses to make them more infectious. They're really playing with fire, and that fire really lit up the world and burned it. And I think we need to get to the truth of the matter. And the fact is, the State Department was warning about their safety protocols, and many of the research workers were actually hospitalized with flu-like symptoms consistent with COVID. And finally, the World Military Games that took place in October, 9,000 military personnel came in all over the world to participate, and many of them left with COVID-like symptoms. I think that was the first super spreader, if you will, that began.
On immigration, a critical issue to your home state of Texas, some critics suggest your governor, Greg Abbott, would do better spending funds on upgrading the electrical grid over using $250 million on restarting the border wall. How do you respond?
Well, this it was a self-inflicted wound and a foreign policy blunder. The president, with one stroke of a pen on inaugural day, rescinded the Remain in Mexico agreements, the asylum cooperation agreements with Central America. The Trump administration got this one right. And to undo that with the stroke of a pen, really not knowing what he was doing other than the fact that Trump's name was on it, caused significant damage. When I talk to Border Patrol, there's a direct cause and effect between these foreign policy decisions and what we're seeing now at the border. According to the Secretary of Homeland, the worst in 21 years. And it's really sad to see these young children down there, Donna detention facility, in tears, not knowing where they are without their parents. It's caused a humanitarian crisis. It's going to cause a human trafficking crisis. And for those little girls, a sex trafficking crisis. And again, the Biden administration is going to own this. And I don't know how they can fix it because they're not willing to go back to these policies. And it's very, very sad.
During the Trump administration, you said a physical barrier wasn't a panacea to solving the problem. And you and your Democratic counterpart, Eliot Engel, were critical when the Trump administration temporarily cut off funding to Central American countries. What is the Biden administration getting right in focusing on these other factors related to illegal migration?
Well, I do think, you know, infrastructure or the wall plays a big part in the security at the border. We have to. It's manpower, technology, and infrastructure, and that would be the wall. When you get to the root cause of the problem, this is where we need to do a better job working with Central America. When I talked to the ambassador from Guatemala, he said, we're losing a generation of my children. Mm-hmm. What I need now is not aid, but trade. And what we need to do is work with the State Department, Development Finance Corporation to get private investment down in Central America. Because as long as the conditions are so bad down there, the families are willing to pay a life savings to hand their children over to a trafficker. You know, I was a federal prosecutor, chaired Homeland Security. The traffickers are vicious, and they exploit these children. They separate them from the families, and they really don't care about these children. And they bring them over, dump them off across the river, create a diversion, and then the drugs come in another sector. with fentanyls and all sorts of dangerous things that are killing Americans as I speak in the United States.
Okay, to infrastructure. Does Speaker Pelosi's insistence on pairing the bipartisan infrastructure agreement with a broader multi-trillion-dollar package damage the chances of getting Republicans to vote yes on infrastructure? And if Republicans ultimately vote against infrastructure, what's the political risk of rejecting a bunch of pretty popular investments?
Well, I think infrastructure is popular, and I think it is bipartisan. And I think, I know the Senate, working with the president, is trying to work out a bipartisan agreement. That's our best chance for success here. I think with the House, what Pelosi put forward was a totally partisan measure. 1 out of every $2 went to the Green New Deal. Totally unacceptable to Republicans. If you're really serious about this, let's look at traditional infrastructure, and that is roads, bridges, rural broadband, which is so important to the country right now, and not muck it up with things that have nothing to do with infrastructure. I worry that they're going to expand health care and education, have nothing to do with infrastructure. And then Bernie Sanders will use a reconciliation process to basically open it up to a massive tax increase. And this is the Trojan horse syndrome that I think we're most worried about.
Congressman McCaul, thank you for joining us today. I hope you and your family enjoy your 4th of July.